Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is Jeff Rumburg. I'm a managing partner with MetricNet, and I will be your presenter for today's webcast on contact center performance targets. I want to welcome all of you and thank you for participating in our webcast today. And I want to thank BrightTalk for inviting MetricNet to speak on this topic. Now, before we get started, I have just a few administrative announcements to make. During today's webcast, all of you will be in listen-only mode. But if you have any questions during the webcast, you will notice a questions button just below the image of my slides. During the webcast, you can click that button and type in your questions as the webcast progresses. I will wrap up my presentation a few minutes early to answer any questions that you've typed in during the webcast. Just by way of quick introduction, MetricNet's core business is metrics and benchmarking. We conduct contact center benchmarks in virtually every industry and now have the largest database of contact center process and performance indicators in the industry. Now, if you're interested, you can download today's presentation and the associated attachments. Just click the attachments button that you see there at the bottom of the screen. And we also have two polls in our webcast today. So when we get to those polls, I'll ask you to vote on those when they come up. Just click the vote button. And of course, we want your feedback, and I would invite you to rate our webcast as you exit today's webcast. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I've been in this industry now for approximately 30 years, and during that time, I've had the honor and privilege of working with several thousand contact centers worldwide. These contact centers operate in virtually every vertical market and cover every level of government, federal government, state, local government. And ever since I got started in this industry, there's been this talk of people, process, and technology. This has always been kind of the reigning paradigm of the contact center. And for that matter, for technical support contact centers, otherwise known as service desks. A number of years ago, we started to ask ourselves whether or not this paradigm really reflected excellence in service and support. In other words, if you were really good at people, process, and technology, would you have a world-class contact center? Now, I'll mention world-class a couple of times in my presentation today. And so I think since I'm mentioning it, it's only fair to define what we mean by a world-class contact center. And there's four components of our definition here. One has to do with quality, and specifically the ability to consistently exceed customer expectations. So you can measure this in a variety of ways. Customer satisfaction is a very common way to do it. You could look at customer effort score. You might look at net promoter score, might look at call quality. There's a variety of ways you could measure quality. But what we're looking for are contact centers that operate in the top quartile of the industry. That's what we define as being high quality. Secondly, you've got to deliver that quality at a reasonable value. In other words, you've got to do so without exceeding budgetary constraints. Everyone operates within budgetary constraints. I haven't yet seen a contact center manager that isn't constrained by budget. So the second component of our definition is that you've got to be efficient. And what that means specifically is that we look for cost per contact in the bottom quartile of the industry, meaning bottom 1/4. And if you're a revenue generating contact center like telemarketing, telesales, or debt collections, we like to see that revenue generated in the top quartile of the industry. So our first two components are high quality, low cost. The third component, it has to do with industry best practices, which are pretty well understood, pretty well documented at this point, so you don't really have to guess about what those are. But we like to see that an organization is relatively mature when it comes to the industry's best demonstrated practices. We have an actual maturity assessment that we use to determine this level of maturity, and on a scale of 0 to 100%, 100 being perfect maturity, 0 being no maturity whatsoever, we look for a score of 75% or above. So once again, top quartile on following industry best practices. And then the fourth component of our world-class definition. So we like to see that the contact center is adding measurable value. One way to look at this is through ROI, return on investment. So if you're a customer service contact center, say in hospitality, and you're spending $10 million per year delivering that service, and we measure the ROI, the return on that $10 million investment is $30 million, your ROI would be 300%. You create a $30 million return on a $10 million investment. I've written a white paper on how you measure ROI. It turns out you can measure it not only for revenue producing contact centers, but you can also measure it for customer service contact centers in virtually every industry. So this is what a world-class contact center looks like. Top quartile on quality, bottom quartile on cost, meaning low cost. You're following industry best practices and your maturity is in the top quartile on that. And then your ROI, which can be measured even for a non-revenue producing contact center, your ROI is above 100%. Here's what we discovered is that despite the fact that this paradigm has been around for a long time now, people, process, and technology, these three components by themselves don't get you to world-class performance. And the primary missing component we discovered through empirical observation, through hundreds of benchmarks, was metrics and the discipline of performance, measurement, and management. So when we put metrics into the equation, and although we show it here at the bottom of the pyramid, it doesn't mean that it supersedes people, process, and technology, but it does say that it's foundational to success in running a contact center. So people, process, and technology by itself doesn't get you there. But if you have a metrics discipline, we call it the discipline of performance, measurement, and management, and that's mature. In other words, metrics discipline is mature along with your people, process, and technology. You will achieve world-class performance as I defined it on the prior slide. Now, this isn't just me being dogmatic about metrics, not me saying this because the name of the company is MetricNet. We have empirical evidence to this effect. What I'm showing here on page 8 is metrics maturity x-axis, meaning 1 through 5 or 0 through 5, 0 being least mature, 5 being most mature. Think of a CMM, capability maturity model. Metrics maturity on the x-axis, balance score on the y-axis. Right now, I haven't yet spoken about the balance score, but momentarily I'm going to explain what that is. It's actually a mechanism that enables you to develop a single overall measure of contact center performance. And here's what the data is telling us is that as the metrics mature, we get better outcomes on the balanced scorecard. That's what the green dashed line is. It's a regression line, linear regression through this data, 106 data points. You can see that they move up and to the right. There is a lot of dispersion around the mean. It's not a perfect R-square of 1, but it is clearly a positive R-square. R-square is goodness of fit, shows correlation. It measures correlation mathematically. And what it's saying is that as metrics mature, we get better outcomes on our balanced scorecard. So X drives Y, X is input, metrics maturity is the input, balance score is the output. We have a lot of control over how we mature our metrics, and it's not a hard thing to do. It's just that many contact centers are unfamiliar with the success factors for maturing the metrics. And part of what I want to accomplish today is help you understand how to mature those metrics and specifically how to set performance targets relative to those metrics. But this is a critical slide because what it says is that not only is there correlation between the maturity of your metrics and your outcomes, meaning your performance, but there is a cause and effect relationship here. We can measure that. There's various statistical tests that enable us to do that. One in particular is called the Granger test that allows us to differentiate between mere spurious correlation and cause and effect relationships. This is clearly a cause and effect relationship. We can measure that. And it's telling us that as we mature our metrics, our overall performance will improve. This is the power of metrics. Metrics are, we believe, one of the linchpins of success in running an effective contact center. Now, there's a 9-step or 9 success factors associated with maturing the metrics for a contact center. So you can ask yourself the following questions. Do you have KPIs metrics? That's the very first at the bottom of our hierarchy here. Secondly, are you using metrics for reporting? Only about 90% of contact centers use their metrics for reporting, which I find somewhat astonishing. If you have metrics, what good are they unless you use them to report on performance? Can you define your metrics? Only 80% of contact centers can accurately define all of their metrics. Metrics in particular, like schedule adherence, occupancy, utilization. Many contact centers struggle to define what those metrics mean and what the actual mathematical definition of those metrics are. Do you set performance targets with your metrics? Only 60% of contact centers do that. And that's why this webcast is dedicated to the topic of creating performance targets for your metrics, because only 60% of contact centers do that. My thought has always been that if you have a metric, you should have a target for the metric. One exception would be handle time. I don't believe it's a good idea to establish a handle time target because it tends to drive the wrong behaviors. So if you have an agent on the phone and you have a handle time target of 7 minutes per transaction, a lot of times agents will start to hurry up to try and get that transaction completed in under 7 minutes. We believe that that's the wrong behavior. You're far better off letting the agent decide when they've exhausted all possibilities. It might be at 10 minutes, it might be at 2 minutes, but let the agent decide when they're done with a particular call. If you have the right incentives in place, or a chat for that matter, if you have the right incentives in place, they will stay on the chat or the call or work on the email as long as there's a reasonable chance that they can get it resolved. However, if they discover immediately on a call or an email or a chat that it's out of their area of expertise or not something that they're qualified to resolve, you're better off getting rid of it quickly. By getting rid of it, I mean you transfer it or you pass it along to someone who has the capability to resolve that particular chat, call, or email. So we're not in favor of performance targets around handle time. However, for every other metric that you track in the contact center, we believe that you should have a performance target. And we're going to talk in a few minutes about how you establish those performance targets. Cause and effect, we're halfway up our hierarchy now. Only 30% of contact centers understand the cause and effect relationships of the most important metrics for the contact center. I'm going to share with you a diagram that shows you what those cause and effect relationships are. As we move up the hierarchy, notice the green arrow on the right, increasing value. As we move up the hierarchy, each of these success factors becomes progressively more important. Are you using metrics diagnostically? In other words, can you interpret them and determine what they're telling you? Do you understand what's driving performance gaps, both positive and negative? Next is prescription. Can you take that diagnosis and turn it into an action plan, a set of tasks that you would complete in order to continuously improve your performance, which is the next, the 8th level on our hierarchy. And then finally, if you do all the first 8 success factors effectively, you execute those well, you will achieve world-class performance. But only about 5% of contact centers achieve world-class performance, according to the definition I gave you about 5 minutes ago. So this is a really good diagram for understanding the success factors around the metrics of the contact center. As you move up the hierarchy, each success factor becomes progressively more important. We won't talk about every one of these elements of the hierarchy today, but we will drill down on and focus on the 4th one, setting performance targets with your metrics. That's the topic of our webcast today. Now, this brings us to our first polling question, and we're interested in knowing what level of effort your organization spends on the discipline of performance measurement and management. You might do nothing, none at all. You might spend some time on metrics, that is, defining them, maturing them, using them for reporting. Or you might spend a lot of effort on your metrics. So we're interested in knowing what level of effort your organization spends on the discipline of performance measurement and management. So we'll give you a minute to answer that question, or maybe 30 seconds to answer that question. And by the way, feel free to type in questions as we go along. I want to make sure that we've got some nice questions to answer here at the end of the webcast. So what level of effort does your organization spend on performance, measurement, and management? going to keep that poll open for another few seconds here, and then we're going to close the poll and move on. Okay. We'll share those results with you. We'll close the poll, share those results with you. And there we go. Okay. Let's move on. We're going to shift gears now. And what I want to share with you on slide 11 are some of the most common contact center metrics. This would be for a typical inbound customer service contact center. 6 categories of metrics: cost, quality, productivity, agent service level, and contact handling metrics. We call it says call handling, but it's really all contacts. Could be an email, could be a chat, could be a walk-in, could be a web submitted question or inquiry. But this is our taxonomy. We organize the metrics into these categories. There's about 20 metrics on this page. Not all of them are KPIs, key performance indicators. KPIs are a subset of all metrics. We selected these because they are the most common metrics we see for an inbound customer service contact center. They're voice specific, but it's very easy to add metrics for other channels: chat, walk-up, email, web submit, SMS, and the like. But this is a fairly common taxonomy: 6 categories of metrics. Cost metrics are driven by productivity. Quality metrics are driven by a combination of agent metrics, service level metrics, etc. But this is the taxonomy that we use. Keep in mind, however, that there are hundreds of metrics that we have seen in the contact center. Some of them differ based on vertical market. Some of them differ based on whether you're inbound or outbound. Some of them differ based on whether or not you're providing service or sales. So there's a lot of different metrics in this industry, but these are among the most common, and they're the metrics that we use when we benchmark an inbound customer service contact center. Now, there's an 80-20 rule when it comes to contact center metrics. The key performance indicators are the ones shown on this page. Remember, not every metric is a key performance indicator. KPIs are a subset of all metrics. And what we have is a taxonomy on this page of accessibility: how easy is it for the customer to reach you? Quality: how effective are the transactions? Efficiency: remember, one of the components of our world-class definition is keeping it low cost, bottom quartile on cost. Cost metrics, strategy metrics, which would include your employee job satisfaction and your customer satisfaction, and then an aggregate metric, which is the balanced scorecard, which pulls together the prior 6 metrics and creates a single overall measure of contact center performance. So accessibility, percent of calls answered in 30 seconds. We could also look at accessibility for the chat channel, the email channel, the SMS channel. We could look at ASA instead of percent answered in 30 seconds. But basically, this is a responsiveness metric. Shows how easily the customer can access the contact center. For an inbound customer service contact center, FCR, first contact resolution rate, is your biggest single driver of customer satisfaction. So we consider that a quality metric. Schedule adherence: the more effective your schedule adherence, the higher your schedule adherence is, the more efficient your contact center is going to be. Cost per contact is a primary measure of efficiency in a contact center. You can also look at cost per minute of handle time. And in fact, when we get to the section on establishing performance targets, we look at cost per minute of handle time rather than cost per contact. That way we normalize it handle time, because you would not expect the same target on cost per contact for a 5-minute handle time contact as you would for a 15-minute handle time contact. Naturally, you would expect a higher cost for the 15-minute contact handle time versus the 5-minute contact handle time. Strategy, customer and employee job satisfaction, these are easily measured. And then the balanced scorecard is a mechanical process, also quite easily measured, and we'll get to that momentarily. In fact, we'll get to it right now. Here's an example of a contact center scorecard. You start by establishing the metrics that will be in the scorecard. And in this particular example, you can see that we have 6 metrics. We have cost per contact, customer satisfaction, agent utilization, which is a measure of productivity, first contact resolution rate, job satisfaction, and speed of answer. Now, the second step in creating the scorecard is to put a weight on each metric. Now, these weightings represent MetricNet's judgment. You can see we've overweighted cost per contact and customer satisfaction. That's because those are the 2 foundation metrics. They are the most important metrics. your cost per contact, which is your primary measure of efficiency, and customer satisfaction, which is your primary measure of effectiveness. And then the other metrics have a lesser weighting. But again, there's nothing magic about these weightings. They represent MetricNet's judgment. You can put any metrics you want in your scorecard, and you can put any weightings you want on your scorecard metrics. They do need to add to 100%, though, as you can see in this example. Now, the next thing we do is we establish the worst and best case scenarios. Typically, this would come from benchmarking data. So when we benchmark a contact center against 20 or 30 or 40 other contact centers, we simply pick out the worst performer and the best performer, and we get a performance range. Now, if you don't have benchmarking data, what you can do is a thought experiment and simply ask yourself, in the worst case scenario, how high would our cost per contact be? And in a best case scenario, how low would our cost per contact be? Likewise, for customer satisfaction, in a worst case scenario, how low would it go? And in a best case scenario, how high would it go? You can do that thought experiment, but ideally you want to have benchmarking data in that third and fourth column from the left, your worst case, best case scenarios. Now, your actual contact center performance would go in the third column from the right. That's real data from a benchmark we conducted. And you're going to see, as I continue through this example, we're going to reuse this data, the data where it says your actual performance, so $6.44 cost per contact, 94.7% customer satisfaction, and so on. We're going to reuse this data. So we're using the same case study as we continue on through this exercise. Now, the metric score is something that's calculated using an interpolation formula. And the way that interpolation formula works is that we take, whoops, didn't mean to erase those. Let me go back to that. The interpolation formula is the worst case minus your score. That's the numerator. And the denominator is the range, which is worst case minus best case. That will yield a metric score between 0 and 100%. You can see in this example that there's a score of 0 on ASA. That's because this particular contact center had the highest speed of answer at 229 seconds, so they scored no points. But they got a very good score on first contact resolution rate. Their score there is 90.4%. That's because they're much closer to the best case scenario than they are to the worst case scenario. So once again, the calculation there is worst case minus your performance. That's the numerator. Divide that by the denominator, which is worst case minus best case. That will produce a metric score between 0 and 100%. If you're at 0, you have the worst score in the benchmark or in the range. And if you're at 100%, you have the best score in the benchmark or the range. Now, the final step in creating the scorecard is to multiply the metric score of the metric weighting to come up with a balanced score in the right-hand column. When we add those together, we come up with a single score that ranges from 0 to 100%. The closer to 100% you are, the better your overall score is. Closer to 0% you are, the worse your score is. It turns out that this is one of the few symmetrical distributions in the contact center industry. Most distributions are strongly influenced by the Erlang C distribution, which defines the rate at which contacts come into a contact center. It's a very skewed distribution, has a large hump on the left-hand side and a long tail on the right-hand side. And again, it defines the rate at which contacts come into a contact center during any given period of time. It might be for a given 1 hour increment, a given day, a given week, a given month, a given year. But the rate at which contacts come into a contact center is probabilistic in nature. We don't know for sure how many contacts we're going to get during any given increment of time, 30 minutes, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, etc. But we can probabilistically define it. Now, the fact that that probability distribution is non-symmetrical, skewed right with a long tail on the right-hand side, means that almost every other distribution, probability distribution in service and support in the contact center is also skewed. But this is one of the few, that is when we look at the contact center balance scorecard, it has a nice symmetrical normal distribution. It's a nice bell-shaped curve. And normally the average for a large group of contact centers is right around 50%. In this particular case, for this benchmark, the average, and we've got close to 25, it looks like 26 contact centers represented here. The average score is a red dashed line going horizontally across this chart Average balance score is 55.6, which is a little bit higher than we normally see. Normally, the number's right around 50%. Now, our client, company XYZ, scored 64.7%. You can see that number back on the prior page, lower right-hand corner, green cell, 64.7%. When we put that on a bar chart, as we do on this page right here, you can see they were in 7th place out of 27 companies in this benchmarking peer group. So they are above average, second quartile, not quite top quartile, but they are an above average performer. This is a very visual diagram right here. It's a bar chart or a distribution chart. It shows the distribution of balance scores for a group of 27 contact centers. Our client, company XYZ, placed 7 out of 27. So it was a good score. It wasn't a great score, but it was a good score. They were well above average. So the balance score answers 2 important questions for you. 1, how are we performing at a point in time? And secondly, how are we trending over time? If you update your scorecard monthly, hopefully you get a chart that looks something like this. This is real data from a client of ours. The blue bars represent their monthly calculated balance score, and the green background represents the trailing 12-month average. And you can see that they didn't go straight up, they didn't go straight down, but over time, they trended upwards. This is what you want to see. Nobody goes straight up, nobody goes straight down. There's always some up and down, but if in the aggregate you get an upward trend, which is what the background green color is showing, that's a good thing. Now keep in mind, what we've done here is we've aggregated a disparate set of metrics, some with units of dollars, some with units of percent, some with units of seconds. We've normalized those, aggregated them to create a single overall measure of contact center performance. That answers 2 important questions. 1, how are we performing at a point in time relative to a valid external peer group? And secondly, how are we trending over time? No other metric will answer those 2 questions for you. ASA won't do it, cost per contact won't do it, customer satisfaction, agent satisfaction. No single metric answers those questions for you, which is why MetricNet developed this concept about 15 years ago of creating a single overall measure of performance called the Balance Scorecard. That allows you to compare your performance to a valid external peer group and allows you to track and trend your performance on a monthly basis. I mentioned earlier that I would show you what some of the more important correlations are, cause and effect relationships for the contact center. We start with our foundation metrics of cost per contact, our primary measure of efficiency, and customer satisfaction, our primary measure of effectiveness. Those 2 are driven respectively by agent utilization and first contact resolution rate. As agent utilization increases, cost per contact goes down because these are labor-intensive functions. 70% of your costs are tied up in your human resources, your agents, your supervisors, team leads, workforce schedulers, QA, QC, and likewise. First contact resolution rate is your main driver of customer satisfaction. Then we have a tertiary level of metrics. The metrics in the dark blue boxes are those that are on the short list, meaning that they are key performance indicators. We have agent job satisfaction, which is critically important because it drives customer satisfaction. So this old adage, happy agent equals happy customer, is not just a cliche. It turns out that it's actually empirically demonstrable. We can prove this, that as agent job satisfaction goes up, so too does customer satisfaction. And as agent job satisfaction improves, absenteeism and turnover goes down, and that in turn reduces your cost per contact. Then we have our drivers of agent job satisfaction, which are coaching, career pathing, and training. This is an important diagram to understand because what it says is that the metrics of an inbound customer service contact center are just not random. They're just not floating around out there. They're all interconnected and interrelated, and this is showing what those relationships are. This puts a great deal of power in your hands because it shows you where you can pull levers to achieve desired outcomes. So if you're looking for better agent utilization and hence lower cost, you can get there through more effective scheduling. You can get there by backing away from aggressive service levels. If you're looking for a higher level of customer satisfaction, you can pull the lever on FCR and agent job satisfaction. If you get to a higher first contact resolution rate and a higher agent job satisfaction, you can expect to see higher levels of customer satisfaction. So this is a very powerful diagram. It shows that the metrics are not simply random numbers floating around out there. They are all interconnected. And when you understand those interconnections and those interrelationships, it allows you to control them, to pull the levers you need to pull to achieve desired outcomes. So Back to our paradigm here, our 9 success factors. We want to focus now on setting performance targets. So let me give you a case study here. This is actual benchmarking data from a contact center benchmark, and you'll recognize some of the metrics. Cost per inbound contact at $6.44, customer satisfaction at 94.7. Let me show you where those showed up back on the balanced scorecard. Here, $6.44 on the cost per inbound contact, 94.7% customer satisfaction. So we're continuing with our example here. We're using the same data we use for the balanced scorecard to ask ourselves, how do we establish performance targets? So this was a snapshot from their benchmarking report, company XYZ, their performance, third column from the left, the metrics we used in the benchmark, second column from the left, the taxonomy, the MetricNet, their metric type in the left-hand column. And then for the peer group, the 27 contact centers that were in this peer group, we show statistics, including the arithmetic average, the minimum, which is the low data point, the median, which is the middle data point, and the maximum. The average and the median are different statistics. Average is just the arithmetic average. The median shows the middle data point in the distribution. And for symmetrical distribution, the average and median will be the same. But as I mentioned earlier, most distributions in the contact center are not symmetrical. So if the median is to the right of the average, it means you're skewed right. If the median is to the left of the average, it means you are skewed left. Most distributions are skewed right in the contact center industry. Now we can look at the quartiles for some of the more important metrics. These are the same metrics that were in the scorecard earlier. So again, right-hand column here, you should recognize these numbers: $6.44, 94.7 CSAT, 58.6% agent utilization, 92.5% FCR, 84.5% job satisfaction, and 229 seconds ASA. The dark blue cells on this chart show which quartile we're in. The first quartile is always the best performing quartile. Quartile simply means 1/4. So if we have 27 or 28 data points, it means there are 7 data points in each quartile, 1/4. We stack rank cost per inbound contact. The top 7 performers are in the top quartile. The bottom 7 performers are in the bottom quartile. Likewise, for customer satisfaction, we stack rank the data. The top 7 performers are in the top quartile. The bottom 7 performers are in the bottom quartile. You can see that in this benchmark, our client was in the 3rd quartile on cost, so they were a bit below average. Top quartile on customer satisfaction, 2nd quartile on utilization, top quartile on first contact resolution rate and job satisfaction, and bottom quartile on speed of answer. So these quartile charts are very visual. You can look at these and very quickly see how you're performing for the metrics in this particular example, the metrics for the balanced scorecard. We can also do the same thing for the metrics divided out in different ways. We can look at the cost metrics on a quartile chart. We can look at productivity metrics on a quartile chart, service level metrics, agent metrics, quality metrics. We can look at all of them on a quartile chart. But we're sticking with the balanced scorecard metrics. The 6 metrics in the left-hand column are the same metrics that came out of the balanced scorecard, and the far right column are the same performance indicators, the same measures, if you will, same values as we saw in the balanced scorecard. Now, this is a nice segue into our discussion of setting performance targets, because ideally, your performance target should be established to get you into the top quartile relative to a valid peer group. What's a valid peer group? Well, they're contact centers that have similarity to your contact center in terms of scope, meaning services offered, scale, meaning volume of monthly contacts plus or minus 20%. Complexity, think handle time. If you're a 6-minute handle time, you want to compare yourself against other contact centers that have 5 to 7 minute handle time. And then geography, because these are labor intensive functions. You don't want to compare a North American contact center, for example, to a contact center in Eastern Europe or the Philippines or India. It's not a fair comparison. So when I talk about a valid external peer group, I'm talking about comparability in scope and scale, complexity, and geography. Now, top quartile on the metrics that are in our scorecard is shown on the green side of these bars. Green is good, red is bad. So if you're on the red side, it means that your performance is not good. If you're on the green side, it means your performance is good. I've organized each of these bars into quartiles. So to be in the top quartile on cost per minute of handle time, you got to be below 85 cents per minute of handle time. To be in the top quartile on voice customer satisfaction, you got to be above 94.2%. Top quartile utilization is above 63.2%, and so on. The balanced scorecard to get into the top quartile would be 61.1%. So you can see that we've organized these into quartiles. This helps you establish performance targets, because the principle I want to convey here is that nobody's going to be the best performer in every metric. It's impossible, because there are trade-offs that have to be made between the various metrics. So when we construct a balanced scorecard for a contact center, nobody ever has the best performance on every single metric because of the trade-offs that need to be made. However, what we know empirically and have seen demonstrably is that you can be top quartile. You may not be the best on every metric, but you can be top quartile on each metric. And that's how we go about establishing performance targets. So once again, center column on this chart, page 22, slide 22, represents data we've been working with all along from our initial scorecard, $6.44 cost per contact, customer satisfaction 94.7%, and so on. The balance score, you may recall, was 64.7%. Now, the target performance is the performance that gets you to top quartile. So top quartile on cost per contact for this organization would be $5.85. How do we get there? Well, we take their handle time, multiply it by 85 cents. So handle time times 85 cents gets them to this cost per contact of $5.85. They were already ahead. They were already in the top quartile on CSAT, which is why that cell is green. They needed to get to 63.2% utilization to hit top quartile. First contact resolution rate, 90.2% would be top quartile. Agent job satisfaction, 88.4%. 27 seconds would be top quartile on ASA. Now, when we run the scorecard with these target performance numbers, we can simulate what the balanced score would be, and they would be at 79.6%. So when we originally calculated their balanced score, they were at 64.7%. If they hit these target performance levels, top quartile for each metric, their balanced score will go to 79.6%. That's also a top quartile score. So the two green cells represent the metrics where they're already hitting the performance target, meaning they're above top quartile or in the top quartile. The others that are just white mean that they have some room for improvement to get into the top quartile. And when we simulate in the balanced scorecard, what would their balanced score be if they hit these top quartile targets? Their balanced score would be just under 80%. So what that would do would push them into second place. Recall when we originally looked at this chart, upper left part of the chart, they were in 7th place. If they hit these performance targets, which we always design to be achieved within 6 months or less. So when we do a benchmark and we establish performance targets, the goal is to help our clients get there in less than 6 months. So in less than 6 months, the goal was to get to 79.6% on the balanced scorecard, which would have moved them into second place. So we simulate the scorecard. They go from 7th place to second place when they hit these performance targets. So here's what actually happened. In this particular case, we're showing their performance 12 months later. The target performance on cost per contact was $5.27. 12 months later, they were at $5.58. So they missed it by 31 cents. Not bad. Customer satisfaction, they exceeded their target. They met their target on agent utilization. They exceeded their target on first contact resolution rate and job satisfaction. They fell a little bit short of their target on speed of answer. Top quartile would have been 59 seconds. They were down to 79 seconds, which is much, much better than the 229-second ASA that they had when we did the benchmark. So their original balance score was 64.7%. 12 months later, or their performance target was 73.4%. 12 months later, they were at 76.5%. So they actually exceeded their balance score target because they did so well on customer satisfaction, net first contact resolution rate, and agent job satisfaction. Even though they missed their target on cost per contact, they missed their target on ASA, they more than made up for it on customer satisfaction, first contact resolution rate, and job satisfaction. So they exceeded their performance target for the balanced scorecard. Now, one of the things we have at MetricNet is a performance targets calculator. If you're interested, you can go to our website, you can download that, and it's going to ask you for some basic data. What's your contact volume? What's your handle time? What's your agent head count? What do agents start at? 35,000, 40,000, 50,000, whatever the number is. And if you can provide your customer satisfaction, your first contact resolution rate, your job satisfaction, and your speed of answer, this calculator will calculate your performance targets for you. So I would encourage you, if you're interested, you can download this template. It makes it real simple to figure out and establish and find out what your top quartile performance targets should be. Now, an extension of the scorecard, which I introduced earlier, would be the agent scorecard. You can't get great performance out of a contact center unless you get great performance out of the individual agents that work in your contact center. Now, mechanically, this works the same way as the overall contact center scorecard, only it's applied at the agent level. And the idea here is you create a scorecard for every agent every month, and it gives you a great way to deliver objective feedback and also coach them, identify where they can improve their performance. Now, in this particular case, the agent scorecard has 7 metrics in it. You see customer satisfaction. This assumes you can track CSAT by agent, which most contact centers can. We got contacts handled per month. That's a productivity metric. We have agent utilization, first contact resolution rate, teamwork, initiative, and mentoring. Now, those are subjective. However, you can still put them on a scale of 1 to 5, and a supervisor who's familiar with the agent's work, they can say, well, on a scale of 1 to 5, I think your teamwork's a 5, or your initiative is a 4, or your mentoring is a 3. It is subjective. However, what I'm trying to point out is that these things do matter. Even though they're not precisely quantifiable, teamwork makes a difference. The willingness to take initiative makes a difference. Your willingness to mentor more junior people makes a difference. And so oftentimes these are included in the individual agent scorecard. Once again, mechanically, this works the same way as the overall contact center scorecard, but on a monthly basis. Instead of sitting down and going through 4 calls with an agent, grading them on those 4 calls, you would actually give them a more holistic review that looks at customer satisfaction, which is a quality metric, contacts handled, which is a productivity metric, agent utilization, also a productivity metric, first contact resolution, quality metric, teamwork, initiative, and mentoring, subjective metrics, but they do make a difference. And so sitting down, here's what I would tell this agent when I look at the metric score, second column from the right. They did well on customer satisfaction. Their metric score was 77%. They did well on contacts handled. They did okay on utilization. Their FCR was not good. They were at 32.9% on the metric score there. They were great on teamwork, pretty good on initiative, needs improvement on mentoring. We can simply look down that second column from the right and coach this particular agent on how they can improve their overall agent score on a monthly basis. Moreover, what most of our clients do is they will show a ranking. They'll publish a ranking of each agent in the contact center on a monthly basis. The idea here is not to embarrass anybody, but rather to help each person who works in the contact center understand how they are performing relative to their peers. So the agents would typically be given a number, as you can see on the left-hand column here. The rankings are next shown. In this particular case, 1 through 20. There are more than 20 agents in this contact center, but I'm just showing the rankings for the first 20. The agent that we're coaching right now, you can see their dark blue bar here. Their June score was 68.2. See that on the prior page here, 68.2. And you can see that overall for the month, they were in 8th place. You can see their May score, their April, March, Feb, January. So you get 6 months of trend here. You get the 6-month average over on the right-hand side. This helps every agent understand how they're performing relative to their peers. So it's meant to create some friendly competition. It's meant to assuage their curiosity, help them understand how they rank next to their peers. And it also has the effect of, for those agents that aren't performing well and they're consistently not performing well, let's take agent number 29 here. They were in 20th place this month. Their score wasn't great. It was only 31.9. In May, it was 43.2. In April, it was 33.1. It's 6 months of pretty low scores. And what this may do is prompt this agent to do one of two things. Either, up their game. Let's figure out how we can deliver a higher quality service and improve my balanced score every month. Or they may opt out and say, this just isn't a good fit for me. So I'm going to find something else to do either at this company or someplace else. That's not a bad thing. We've all seen unfortunate circumstances where agents are in the wrong positions. The job doesn't fit them right. It's too much stress for them. They can't handle coming in on a Monday morning and seeing 150 calls in queue on the reader board. That happens. And not everybody is cut out to do this job. In fact, very few people are cut out to do this job. So the scorecard is designed to be a positive motivator, and these rankings are designed to be a positive motivator to get everybody to deliver their best performance and to cause some reflection and self-examination as to whether or not, the lower performers, those that aren't performing well, are really in the right position and what they can do to either improve their performance or, find something else to do. So for this particular agent, I'm using their performance targets here, 70%. Let me go back 2 charts here. You can see their performance from this page, which would be the 3rd column from the right. And we're coaching this particular agent. Their current schedule adherence is only 70%. Their call quality is 93.1%, which is good. It exceeds target. Customer satisfaction also exceeds target, as does FCR. So they did well on everything except schedule adherence. So the only target we have for them is on schedule adherence. This is an indication that they're either showing up late for work, or they're not logged in when they're supposed to be logged in, or they're taking breaks that are longer than they're supposed to. Schedule adherence is critically important. And although this particular agent is doing well on the quality of calls, the customer satisfaction, the first contact resolution rate, it's really difficult to meet the Erlang demands of an environment like this without good schedule adherence. This number ought to be at least 90. That's why their target is set at 90%. And if they do this, their actual balance score would improve from 67.4 to 84.6. So the 67.4 score would improve to 84.6 simply by improving their schedule adherence. And that's something entirely within the agent's control. There's no mystery about how to adhere to the schedule. You just make sure you're, logged into the ACD, you're sitting in your seat doing your chat or your calls or your email responses when you're supposed to be. It's not a hard thing to do, but if your agents aren't adhering to the schedule, it's going to be very difficult to meet performance targets. So let me summarize here. There's a hierarchy with 9 success factors, and I've gone through those with you. It starts with, do you have metrics? Do you use them for reporting? Do you define them effectively? Do you use them for performance targets? Do you understand the cause and effect relationships? There's 9 success factors. There is an 80-20 rule. Not all metrics are created equal, and what we care about are the key performance indicators. So we care about things like schedule adherence, customer satisfaction, agent job satisfaction, percent of calls answered in 60 seconds or 30 seconds, or ASA, for example. And we care about first contact resolution rate. A balanced scorecard takes those 80-20 rule metrics, that is the KPIs, and creates a single overall measure of performance. Understanding cause and effect relationships is very powerful. I went through that diagram with you. Performance targets are based on industry benchmarks. The goal is to get into the top quartile on the KPIs, just those 6 metrics that matter the most. And then performance targets need to be driven down to an individual agent level. So think transparency, visibility, accountability. Those are 3 things that metrics do for an organization. And you can't get great performance out of a contact center unless you get great performance out of the individuals that work in the contact center. And so the balanced scorecard that we showed is applicable at the contact center level as well as at the individual agent level. The key to getting great performance out of a contact center is to drive targets down to the individual agent level. Again, accountability, visibility, transparency. This is what good metrics do for you. Okay, in a moment, I'm going to get to your questions, but we do have a final poll that I'd like you to respond to. This poll allows you to schedule a free consultation call with MetricNet. So let me go ahead and open that poll and give you a chance to respond to that. So 2 responses. Yes, if you'd like a call back from MetricNet, we can call you today. We can call you tomorrow. If you'd prefer to wait until next week or even later, that's okay. So we're simply giving you an opportunity to schedule a consultation call with MetricNet. These are typically 15 to 20 minutes long. Any question you might have is welcome in those consultation calls. Okay, let me go ahead and close that poll down. Thanks to those who responded to that. We'll get in touch with you to schedule a call with MetricNet for those who answered in the affirmative. Now, I also want to invite you to visit our website at the web address that's shown in the middle of this page. And take a look at the headcount, performance targets in particular. That was the focus of our webcast today. We have a downloadable calculator there for you. We also have budget calculators, ROI calculators, and balanced scorecard templates at the web address shown in the middle of the page. We recently posted our 2020 State of the Customer Experience Report, and that can be downloaded as well. So I would encourage you to visit this URL and take a look at the performance, headcount, balanced scorecard, and performance targets calculators that we offer there. Now, our webcasts are always free of charge. And if you like what you've heard today, I'd encourage you to go to our website to sign up for future webcasts. Next month, our webcast will be on performance targets again, but this time on service desk performance targets. Once again, if you're interested, you can download today's presentation and the associated attachments. Just click the attachments button, and we would ask you to rate our webcast before you leave the webcast today. Give us any feedback that you think might be helpful for us. So once again, let's take a look at the questions we have. Looks like we got quite a few here. So let me start with the first one. How do you diagnose and understand the underlying drivers of performance gaps? There's a couple things. The first is you identify performance gaps through benchmarking. That is the most effective way to identify a performance gap. The second thing is that you understand that cause and effect relationship. And I'll go back to that. It's back quite a few slides, but you may recall the cause and effect relationship. If you understand this cause and effect relationship, it can help you enormously in terms of diagnosing performance gaps. So for example, if we have a gap on cost per contact, the first thing I'm going to look at is agent utilization. If we have a gap on customer satisfaction, I'm going to look at first contact resolution rate or agent job satisfaction. So understanding this is key to diagnosing what's driving performance gaps. Benchmarking will help you identify the performance gap. This cause and effect diagram will help you diagnose the performance gap. That is, explain why that gap exists. And if you can explain it, if you know why the gap is there, you can do something about it. That is, you can close it. You can either mitigate or eliminate the negative performance gaps while perpetuating the positive performance gaps. Okay, next question. How do you determine what KPIs to set targets for? I gave you a list of KPIs for an inbound customer service contact center, and they are the KPIs shown here on the left-hand side of this diagram. These are the most important metrics that you don't have to set a target for every metric, but these metrics you absolutely should have a target for. Now you can set targets for other metrics, just make sure that you're shooting for top quartile for that particular metric. Next question, why is it important to understand maturity when determining metrics? Well, process maturity, that is how mature your contact handling processes are, how mature your metrics are, and so on, is what drives your outcomes. I showed that on one of the very first charts. As your metrics mature, you get better outcomes overall on your contact center. Let me show you that chart, which is right here. A metrics maturity x-axis, move to the right, higher maturity, you get better outcomes, your balanced score. So as your metrics mature, your overall performance gets better. There's only so much you can do if you don't have mature metrics, which is a very common issue in this industry. In fact, of all the process areas we look at when we do a process maturity assessment for a contact center, metrics is universally the weakest area. It's because organizations don't understand metrics, don't know how to establish performance targets, don't set the right performance targets. So maturing the metrics is critical to success in getting better outcomes in your contact center. Next question, how do you measure first contact resolution rate? We look at the percentage of contacts resolved on the initial contact with the customer. And by the way, it only applies to the live channels of voice and chat. It doesn't really have meaning when you're talking about an email submitted contact or SMS, for example, or a web submitted contact. So it really applies to the live channels of voice and chat. If in the determination of the agent, they get resolved on the first contact, that gets you pretty close to the number. But what you really care about is, did the customer feel that they got a resolution on first contact? And the way you get that number is by asking that question in the customer satisfaction survey. So in the CSAT survey, one of the questions should be, did you get resolution on your first contact with the contact center? And if they say yes, okay, that counts as FCR. And if they say no, it doesn't count as FCR. So if you say send out a bunch of surveys every month and you get 100 surveys returned, and 80% of the customers answer, yes, I got resolution on the first contact, then your FCR is 80%, 80 out of 100. How do you measure agent satisfaction? Agent job satisfaction is a critical metric. Go to MetricNet's website, type into the search bar agent job satisfaction, and you will be able to download a template. We have a handful of questions in the survey. It should be very simple. We ask about things like training, coaching, career pathing. And then the most important question is overall, how satisfied are you in this position? 1 through 5, 1 very dissatisfied, 5 very satisfied. The 4s and 5s are the ones who are satisfied in the position. So once again, if you have 100 agents and they all fill out the agent satisfaction survey, and 80 of those 100 agents actually answer that question 4 or 5, then you have 80% agent satisfaction. So the survey should be simple. It should be administered once or twice a year. Should have questions about training, coaching, and career pathing. But the most important question, overall, how satisfied are you in this job? Scale of 1 to 5. The 4s and the 5s are the ones that are satisfied. Last question here is, how would you go about benchmarking your contact center? Yeah, this will sound like a shameless pitch, and maybe it is, but it's not meant to be. You're not going to find benchmarking data on the internet. Some organizations try to. I shared some benchmarking data with you in this particular presentation, benchmarking data around the KPIs that go into the balanced scorecard. So I've shared some benchmarking data with you in this presentation, but it's not applicable to all contact centers. If you're in an insurance contact center, say licensed insurance, and you're doing sales and marketing, or you're doing billing and collections, for a hospitality contact center, the metrics I've shared with you are not necessarily applicable. So you really need benchmarking data. The way you get benchmarking data is you work with a reputable benchmarking firm. So again, not a shameless pitch, but the point is that you're not going to find this data on the internet, and no amount of research is going to help you benchmark your contact center. You really have to work with an organization that has a significant database of process and performance indicators. At MetricNet, we track more than 70 metrics related to the contact center, everything from channel metrics, for example, customer sat by channel, voice, chat, email, SMS, self-help, self-service, as well as handle time by channel, agent job satisfaction overall, and so on. You're not going to find this on the internet. So you really have to work with an organization that does benchmarking and has done a lot of benchmarking, because otherwise you're not going to have a very large peer group. In the sample that I went through earlier, the case study, there were 26 other contact centers in that benchmarking peer group. And that's statistically significant. That's going to give you reliable results, and it's going to give you credibility in the benchmark, because there is such a large number of peers in that benchmarking peer group. So best way to benchmark your contact center is to work with an organization that specializes in contact center benchmarking, because you're not going to find the benchmarking data anyplace else. It's got to be archived by an organization that does a lot of benchmarking, so that you get credibility, statistical significance, and reliability in that benchmark. So thank you all for those questions. It was a pleasure and an honor to be here. I hope you enjoyed today's webcast. I hope you found it to be informative and insightful. So this concludes today's webcast. I hope to see all of you on next month's webcast. Thank you once again.